Anyways, and we'll talk more about that later. Jeff Gorman, Indians 101. We're going to talk some baseball. You can talk with us on Facebook and Twitter and email. Facebook.com/TheSportsFix. Tweet with us at TheSportsFixCLE. Email us, thesportsfix@AOL.com. I'm going to the phones. Jeff Gorman, thank you for sitting tight while I rant and rave. Now let's get back to business. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great, Tues Oct. It's always great to hear you rant and rave. I'm kind of surprised you didn't start us off with that Royals song, since it's actually been banned by a couple of radio stations in San Francisco until the end of the World Series.
I saw that. The DJs have taken it amongst themselves to ban that song there. You know, and listen, I really do. I like the Giants too. I really like both teams in the World Series. I mean, personally, neither one of them is a team that I dislike. But I think for no other reason than this, I got to go with the Royals. The internet, if you want to watch a large group of people face collectively melt off at the same time, just wait for Ned Yost to win the World Series, because there is a group of people out there on Twitter and sabermetricians and all those people that think he's the absolute worst manager of all time, and if he wins the World Series, they may simultaneously, their faces may just melt off. I mean, it's going to be an amazing experience if that man somehow wins. But really, I like it. I call it being a player's manager, but somebody else has a different opinion. But you know, that the small market thing and everything, but the backside, like Mike Brandenberry and I said, is it does have that sting to it, because that very well could have been the Indians playing that role.
Right, it very well could be. And, you know, there is a bit of a respect that we have for the Royals, since we've seen them so up close and personal. We saw how close we came to overtaking them. And, you know, so that's a team that you know, and you can say, you know what, if the Royals were to happen to win the whole thing, they say, yeah, you know, we got beat out by the team that eventually went all the way. But, you know, it's going to be very hard. It's for the Royals to maintain that momentum. Of course, they haven't lost in the entire postseason. But if you look back, remember that Colorado Rockies team in 2007, which went on that insane tear to get into the playoffs and then get all the way to the World Series. And, of course, they wiped out their opponents 4-0 in the NLCS, so they had to sit around and wait for a while. But when it was time to play the World Series against the Red Sox, they had nothing left, and they lost 4 straight. Although the Giants had a pretty long way out, too. Both these teams were waiting 4 or 5 days to get back on the field.
Yeah, for sure, because the both series wrapped up early there, and so you had the good problem there for baseball, and we didn't have to wait even later. But so now, and you bring up San Francisco too. The thing is we look at the Royals, and of course, we followed along with their up and down ride and just getting on that roll. But San Francisco has done some things just in this playoff run as well too. I mean, you know, they played an 18-inning game. I mean, they've put some work in as well too, and they've survived some tough challenges of their own. And really, both teams are coming into this thing, like you said, relatively unscathed. I mean, especially Kansas City, but San Francisco is relatively unscathed. Although it is funny to think the differences in the bounce of a baseball, because I mean that Giants, and we talked about it the other day, that Giants Cardinals series was not as one-sided as you would think if you look at the final breakdown of how the games broke down, because that was a couple ball bounces away of going the complete opposite way, perhaps.
That's right. I'm actually really surprised that series went as short as it did. I thought it was going to go 6, almost all 7 games, but it just really shows how, you know, I think that this is the style of baseball that at least this year is making it. Of course, the Royals playing really kind of a National League style of baseball where, you know, they don't rely on the long ball. They rely on pitching and defense, and, you know, they will painstakingly grind out an inning, moving runners along, sometimes giving up outs, which sometimes drives people crazy in the postseason. But so far, it's worked for them, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Royals just keep going with that same strategy. But you look at teams like the Cardinals and, of course, the Giants, you know, they've got such a good overall team system in place. Of course, the Cardinals are always very high and mighty about their Cardinal way and how they plug in these guys and they keep rolling along. But it seems like the Giants have really perfected it, of course, winning the World Series in 2010 and 12, trying to do it again in 14. And you mentioned even scenarios like that 18-inning game. You come to a situation now where it's time for the World Series, and the Giants just have to come in like, you know, we've been here before, we've seen it all before, and this moment is not too big for them, and it might end up being a little too big for the Royals.
I mean, you're right about the Royals too, and the way they play, and again, their style of play is annoying to the sabermetrics people. And you know what? I have some fun with some guys, Al Chip McKella and Dan Wismar. We talk about that when they're on the show from time to time. About how I have had my eyes opened to some of that stuff. Like, I do see where some of it I go, okay, yeah, you could kind of get a different picture on things, but I do not buy, and this is where I say about Ned Yost, I don't buy that that momentum doesn't exist. I don't believe that there's no such thing as riding a hot hand, or there's no such thing as a clutch player, because they'll tell you that. Sabermetrics will tell you that, and they hate the Royals because they do things like sacrifice bunts and things like that, where in the world of advanced metrics, you don't give up those precious outs. I mean, those are gold, and we're not giving those things up. But I do. I believe that momentum matters. I don't care what advanced metrics you show me. You cannot tell me that certain guys are not just clutch players in any sport, but they will tell you that that's not true. I don't believe you. I don't care what your little statistics say, because numbers are simply ways to justify any argument that you feel like making. You can find a set of numbers to justify it. Some guys are just clutch. Some teams have momentum. Kansas City has momentum, that's for sure. But the thing that's crazy is that San Francisco is not exactly momentumless themselves either.
Right, and the kind of amazing thing about this series is you go in and there's really not a big superstar on either team. I mean, it's not like, well, here's, Derek Jeter, or here's A-Rod, or here's, Pujols or somebody like that. Neither team has that one big, or even, if it was Miguel Cabrera, there's not somebody like that who's this big, obvious guy pitching or hitting who, the other team just has to stop. And it's really strange how it worked out for the Giants, considering how they had Barry Bonds for all those years, racking up all those MVPs. Even Jeff Kent was the MVP once. And, now in the post-Barry Bonds, Jeff Kent era, they win 2 world titles and might win a third. So it's amazing how, all these guys come together. You have individual people who come up clutch on different times, and you talk about different players being clutch, but there's not somebody who has such a big reputation, and it turns out it's a situation like Ishikawa hitting the Giants win the pennant home runs, and it's like, who saw that coming?
Right, exactly. You know what I mean? I mean, who would have told you to put him in that? But then again, I put that's in the category of your gut tells you play Jason Giambi and he walks you off. I mean, obviously I'm going 2 years back now, but you know where I'm going with that. But yeah, right. Absolutely. And you know what? Don't forget too, although this is completely different, these two teams did meet back in the August, I believe, was when they had that series there. Royals swept the Giants, and that was of course in Kansas City, but they outscored them 16-6. That was during that run that we were talking about here on the show, while the Indians were trying to right the ship and their pitching was just getting really righted at that point. That was when Kansas City went on that run where they leapfrogged. They were, a game or so behind the Indians. They leapfrogged the Indians and got right up there on top of Detroit for a time being there. But that was during that stretch where Kansas City really started to separate themselves and make their move towards where they ended up heading.
Yeah, it's kind of strange how that worked out. Even though the Royals won all 3 of those games, it almost seems like that might play into the Giants' hands, where back in the past there would be no interleague play. The Giants would have never seen the Royals, even not in spring training, because they train, I believe, on different sides of the country. But, this isn't the first time they've seen each other. So even though the Giants got rolled in those 3 games, they've seen the Royals before. They've got a little bit of a book on their hitters, and, their main guys can say, okay, I faced these guys once or twice. What can I learn from them? Otherwise, they would be going in against guys like Hosmer, guys like Billy Butler, Alex Gordon, Mike Moustakas, completely blind, having never faced them. And that's one of the real, different things about interleague play and how it's really a regular part of the game right now. Back in the past, this would just be the first time these teams had ever played each other. I think it would have made it a little bit more special, but I think that it really kind of plays into the Giants' hands because they can learn what didn't work in that series against the Royals and maybe come up with a bit of a counterattack.
I'm with you. Jeff Gorman from Indians101.com. J-Rock here. We're talking on the Sports Fix about the World Series, which begins tonight with Kansas City and San Francisco. Let's talk a little pitching. I mean, I know Kansas City's got the bullpen, and we'll talk about that, but starting pitching, I love the Giants starting pitching. I mean, Jake Peavy, I remember when they acquired him, I talked about it on the show, and I said, look at the price for him, because at the time he wasn't looking, as you would expect Jake Peavy to look, but this is what you hoped to get from him. You could have cared less what you got from him during the 162 regular games. You wanted him for that postseason bulldoggedness and that experience, and he's done that so far. I mean, obviously it all starts with Madison Bumgarner. You've got Hudson and Vogelsong who have experience as well. I mean, that's a just those four right there that you're going to match up, and then it starts at the top for Kansas City with Shields and Ventura. Shields and Bumgarner, that's a heck of a game one matchup right there. I know the bullpen is Kansas City's strength, but they're going to need to get some good starting pitching here because they're going to be facing good starting pitching every game of this series.
That's right. There is not a clunker in the Giants starting rotation.
Nope.
And this is pretty much what the Royals got James Shields for. They mortgaged Will Myers, and they thought, wow, boy, you trade a great young slugger like that. That's the kind of thing that drives you crazy. It drove me crazy about Oakland trading, Sexton. I'm still so crazy about that. But this was 2 years ago, and now's the time where they got that big ace starting pitcher right where they want him. So you got to say that was actually a good idea to make that trade, because I don't think they would have been here without Shields. But unfortunately for them, Shields has not done very well in the postseason. In fact, they've really been succeeding despite him. His ERA is around 5, whereas Bumgarner is rolling along with like a 1-something ERA, kind of like having a Clayton Kershaw, having a Corey Kluber, someone who's just slowing people down. So it really puts the pressure on Shields tonight, not just for the first game, but the first game at home. So Royals at least a chance of winning this thing, because if Bumgarner comes in and just throws another one of those dynamite performances, even if Shields gives up, 3 runs or so, then, the Giants are going to win that first game in Kansas City, and then things are really going to shift in their favor after just one game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, the key is it doesn't matter if it's 10-0 or 1-0. You've got to get a lead to that bullpen. That's what your starters need to get you. Obviously, you've got higher expectations, out of a couple of the guys. But when you get into those third and fourth spots, and really, I think Guthrie will play. Really, they haven't decided who exactly is going to fill what role in what spot, but you know that it could be several guys that we've talked about before that'll be in there. I know Guthrie will be one of the guys in that discussion. Vargas, Duffy's possibility as well too, although I don't know. But regardless of that, you want to get to that bullpen, which, as we've talked about for months now, has been the strength. You want to get them a lead, get to that bullpen, and let them grind out those final outs of those games, shorten things up. But you do need to get good starting pitching as well there. And the Giants, same thing there, man. I mean, offensively, they need to try to get to the starting pitchers that for what Kansas City's attack is going to be. Kansas City is going to be trying to get, to the bullpen and then get after them somewhat when you've got the more dominant starting pitchers. Here it's the opposite. You want to try to get to these starters, and Shields has been vulnerable in the playoffs even. He's done what you needed him to do, but he's shown some vulnerability there. He's won all of his starts, but he's given up 3 home runs. He's given up, 10 runs in 16 innings, and he's got a career postseason ERA over 5. So, and that's with 50 innings. So he's got a little bit of a sample size there. So there is some possibilities. That's what you got to do. You don't want to get down into the strength of them. You want to get after those Kansas City starters, and vice versa for Kansas City's offense against the Giants.
Right, and the best way to take Kansas City's strong bullpen out of the equation is just not to get to them in the first place. So really, it's going to be up to the Giants to be very aggressive in the early innings and try to jump out to an early lead, even if that means trying to stretch a double into a triple, trying to take that extra base at home. Just put the pressure on Kansas City, even though, of course, Kansas City has great defense, but just try to get aggressive and try to, push some runs across early so you don't get into a 2-1 situation and then you're up against that bullpen. Although, actually, the Giants bullpen has been just about as good as the Royals bullpen during the playoffs. Their bullpen is about a 1 as well, even though, guys like Sergio Romo and them, they're not really as highly touted as the Royals bullpen.
No, you're right. They have come up